Thank you.
Are we now live, Ben?
Yes, we are. We're live streaming.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Leeds City Region Inclusive Growth and Policies panel. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I'm just going through that for the benefit of the webcast. So people, just in case, we've got these hundreds of thousands of people watching this fantastic meeting, the Leeds City Region. It's probably the highlight of everybody's week to see us in action, because this is where everything happens. Inclusive growth is the future, and we have big opportunities. So welcome again. Item number 1, apologies for absence. I've got Councillor Alex Ross, Councillor Jane Scullion, Kate Hainsworth, and Councillor Waller. Did you say Councillor Waller might be joining us later, Ben?
Yeah, I think he has a meeting until 2:30.
Right, yeah, I've got that, yeah. And I think we've got Jackie's apologies, haven't we, James? Jackie, we met her last week, and she said that she's got another meeting. Yes.
That's correct, Chair.
Yeah, no, I just make sure I've got my notes right. Okay, is there any more apologies, Ben, other than the one that I've just read out?
I think Councillor Pattison has sent apologies.
Councillor Carol. Is that Councillor Carol Pattison?
Yes, yeah. And
yes.
Professor Udi Archibong has sent her apologies. This would have been her first meeting, but she's unable to attend.
Okay, thank you very much, Ben. Item 2, declaration of disclosable pecuniary interest. If you have any, please complete the relevant form and the details and email them to Ben. I've been told we haven't got any, but just in case you do have any, please do complete the form and hand it in to Ben. Item 4, minutes of the previous meeting on the 4th of December. Is there anything on the agenda that's not on the minutes that anybody wants to raise? Actually, before we do that, can I just agree that they're a correct record of what we talked about? Just give me a nod or a wave or something to say yes, okay. Is anything on there that's not on the agenda that matters rising? I can't see anybody. If I miss anybody, Ben, please let me know, because I can only see so many people at a time. Item 5, chair's update. Oh, sorry, Ben, did you want to say something? No?
That's all right. I was just confirming that I'll give you a nudge if anyone wants to speak.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 5, a quick update from me. Firstly, once again, I really appreciate you taking the time to join this meeting. The main agenda today focuses on opportunities that need to be created. And like I was saying, the pandemic has actually brought out very sharp contrast. The way our economy is completely unbalanced, and how that then impacts on people's well-being and their lives and livelihoods. And that's where the recovery will need to actually focus on in terms of boosting not just that people side of stuff, but also from a business point of view. We need to look at new entrepreneurship, look at how social enterprises can shape the new world, the new local economy, how we can start looking at skills, and how the folk that have lost their jobs and that may lose their jobs through the furlough scheme ending, which has been extended somewhat, how we can start to plan for the future in a more meaningful way. So the key challenges, you probably know that at national level, the TUC did a piece of work, and just before I talk about that, you probably saw the documentary that was televised on BBC, where David Harewood, who's an actor, brought out the major inequalities within our society, and it was purely, a lot of it was focusing on BME. And I was actually quite shocked. I don't know what the issues are, but when I was hearing some of the statistics that were being thrown around, I was quite amazed. And some of the stuff was that if you are a black man, you can take in more antidepressants to actually calm you down. And if you're a black woman, because of the way your body is structured, you're more likely to die of pregnancy. And some of the stuff was completely based on fiction. It wasn't really scientific neither, but this is what some perceptions are. And there was a lot more. And if you do get time, I'd encourage you to actually just have a look at it on BBC iPlayer, because it was really, really worrying that the perception within a system is still there. And I know we're doing a lot of work around this, but there's still a lot of I won't say work to do, a lot of ignorance, because if ignorance is actually squashed, then half our battle around hearts and minds changes. So there's a lot of work to do around that. Just going back to what I was talking about in terms of the TUC research, national level, BME unemployment has been twice as much as compared to those other groups, and primarily you're also focusing on women who are of a BME background, who actually are even more likely to actually be unemployed. So there's some really, really important stuff that we need to actually start to address, not just around BME, but around structural inequalities, around poverty and deprivation in our society. And I think there's an opportunity for this board, in whatever format it will take moving forward. The inclusive growth framework was approved at the last panel that was went to the LEP board, and the framework, I'm really pleased to say that it's actually been approved now, the LEP board, because one of the things that we're trying to do is make sure that rather than sort of like look at it as a bolt-on, it's actually an overarching theme that will encapsulate everything that the Leeds region does and in moving forward. There's combined authority meeting tomorrow, where this paper will also go, and the LEP papers. So that'll be like the final hurdle in terms of the bureaucracy. But bureaucracy is one thing. What this agenda is about is actually changing hearts and minds and changing attitudes, and making a society better, to make sure that we actually can pull them levers that are softer than just the levers of transport or the levers of infrastructure. That will go ahead. We need to make sure that we actually get a new focus on what we're trying to do. Also, we identified some early interventions around boosting digital inclusion, social entrepreneurship, skills, social prescribing, which was something that's really important in how we can actually start to actually get the wider voluntary community to engage in actually making sure that people's well-being is actually a priority. The economic recovery plan, which Susan has been working on, and a number of you on this panel may have been part of, that went to the LEP and it was endorsed. And again, entrepreneurship, low carbon, and health, technology and innovation are key features in there, which we need to actually make sure that we drive through this panel moving forward. And the good work charter. When this came to the LEP board, what I said was, if I was an employer or employees who we work with, everybody wants to be a good employer. It's really good to say that, oh, your company is really, really good. It's part of the 100 top firms to work for. But you don't even have to be in the top firm or top 100, locally. If somebody says to a local employer, "Oh, your company down the road is so good that I'm getting really good feedback," that's really, really good for the company. And having good work conditions and service is actually good for the company. It's good for business, and actually it affects the bottom line in terms of profit and loss. But it's not just about working conditions and employment and all that. It's also about retirement and how we can make sure that the people longer have got a better quality of life once they retire and have got good access to pensions. So what the panel did was they approved the report and moving towards developing the Greater Manchester Charter. Why reinvent the wheel when we've already got something that works quite well across the Pennines, and we'll develop that and make it our own. This will mean that we'll be working with universities, the Chartered Institute of Personal Development, ACAS, all the unions and local councils, and also the health sector, the voluntary sector, and private business. And we need to get as many stakeholders engaged as possible to make sure that it actually is a charter that's not just something that is signed and then go away. It actually means something. It's a living document that actually means something to everybody, every single stakeholder, and all our workers. There's some work that's been done around third sector research, better understanding what the third sector is. And in this panel, I think I'm talking to the better informed. But the voluntary community sector has actually done so much work in the last 12 months that as a local authority leader and talking with the chief executive of Kirklees, you know, the way the services have transformed have been remarkable. The kind of stuff that we wanted to do happened so fast. The reason why that happened is because the private sector completely folded up, and that's where both the NHS, the local government, and the voluntary community sector came into their own. But we need to understand more about this. We need to understand how the sector is funded, how the sector is motivated, how the sector, the churn and the turnaround, and how we can actually provide more impetus. Because one of the things that happened, and you'll probably agree with this, is when there's a crisis, everybody appreciates everybody else. But as soon as the crisis is over, right, yeah, it's back to normal business. And you can see that with the way, and this is not political, this is just a fact. We're all clapping for the great NHS. But now, you know, what's happening in terms of the 1% pay rise that they've offered, I think is a bit of a kick in the teeth. So I really hope that the government does actually think about this, because, you know, and again, it's not political, it's just that we do need to recognise, we do need to reward where reward is due. So it's something that we just need to keep on board. At the same time, the third sector is critical as well, and that's where we need to actually start to focus how we can actually develop that sector a lot more powerfully in terms of, you know, giving them the right tools and resources to move forward. And finally, International Women's Day today, 8th of March. It's something that we should all celebrate, but at the same time, we should also not forget that the amount of work that we have to do on this agenda is still massive. It's huge. You know, we want to do that by celebrating the amount of work and the amount of innovations women have achieved. We need to also raise awareness of how women, you know, have actually done this, because it's been a struggle. It has been a struggle, and the struggle continues. And how we can actually make sure that gender parity is actually equalized and normalized and addressed a lot more sharply. And basically start to put that within our inclusive growth agenda as well. Like I mentioned, BME women are probably, and again within the BME, probably certain BME groups are even more marginalised than other BME groups. So without further ado, thought I'd quickly go through a whistle-stop tour of the stuff that I want to talk about. Just an update. But if there's any questions, I'm happy to come back to them at the end. We've got a huge agenda. Item 6 is COVID-19 update on data and impacts. The purpose is to consider the impact of COVID-19 based on the latest data and the implications, including unequal impacts. Andrew Fitzpatrick, I think, is on the line. Andrew's there, I can see him. So Andrew, can I ask you to introduce the item, and then what we'll do is we'll take some questions and comments, and then we'll then look at the recommendations. So Andrew, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, great. Hopefully you can hear me all right and see me. So as part of a weekly report, the Combined Authority looks at the secure PHE kind of detailed data on COVID infection rates, and we report to our senior team on the current position. I think over the last few weeks, I appreciate that the data that's been circulated, the report that's been circulated, probably is a little bit out of date now because these things change rapidly. But there's two main points which have kind of come out of analysis over the last few weeks or months. So the first one being that it's become quite clear that COVID infection rates within West Yorkshire aren't falling as fast as other parts of England. So actually within Yorkshire and Humber, rates are within West Yorkshire are highest, along with places like Barnsley, Doncaster and Hull. Importantly, if you were to rank COVID rates from high to low by local authority or particular local authority, generally speaking, West Yorkshire districts are now at the high end of the spectrum. Now, a few months ago, we were at totally the opposite end of the spectrum because we had a relatively low peak in comparison to other areas. And really importantly, if you look at the relative fall, so that's the percentage fall from the highest point, the peak, the third wave peak until now, all 5 of the West Yorkshire districts are amongst the areas with the lowest proportionate fall in terms of kind of recovery COVID rates, if that makes sense. So that's the first point. Rates haven't, until fairly recently, been falling that fast compared to other parts of England. The second point is that there is a clear established link between COVID-19 case rates and mortality and deprived communities. So if you were to look at the change in rate from the last peak until now, rates in the most deprived areas have seen the slowest changes. So they've reduced by about 50% up until the 24th of February in the most deprived areas, whereas the least deprived areas, COVID-19 rates have fallen much faster. The latest data up until the 24th of February that we published, rates had fallen by about 81% in the least deprived areas. And that kind of pattern is evident in other local authorities across England. So if you were to plot the proportion of local authorities, the proportion of where there's a high proportion of people with in deprived areas versus COVID rates, there is a linear pattern, and there is a bit of a north-south emerging pattern. At the time that I sent that report round, rates in Yorkshire and Humber, so the region, are around about 2.4 times higher than they were in the southwest, which has currently got the lowest case rates in the country. So there is a relationship between COVID-19 and or case rates and deprivation. And the kind of the final point is that also links to mortality data as well. So if you look at the age standardized mortality rates released by the Office of National Statistics, we can find that the mortality rates are around 2.5 times higher for people who live in the most deprived neighbourhoods compared to those who live in the 10% least deprived neighbourhoods. So if you were to look at district level data on that, West Yorkshire and areas within West Yorkshire, excluding Calderdale, have statistically significantly higher COVID-19 mortality rates than the England average. So at the moment, the data only goes up to the end of January that the ONS have published, but locally, mortality rates are highest within West Yorkshire in Bradford, so about 1.3 times the England average in terms of age standardised COVID-19 mortality rates. And the final point I make is that gap between England average and what's happening locally within West Yorkshire may well grow if the case rates don't fall fast enough, because the area under the curve is the potential to turn into, in terms of case rates, is the potential to turn into more mortality. Hopefully that makes sense. It probably would have been easier with slides, but hopefully you saw the slide pack and part of the appendix.
Thank you, Andrew. Very comprehensive report. Any questions, comments, observations? Wave your hand or use the electronic reactions virtual hand. I've got Peter waving his hand. Peter O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much. Yeah, really excellent slide pack. I just wonder, have we got any data on cases of long COVID at all? People who are still struggling after some time to recover, you know, the debilitating conditions, because clearly that might play into the whole question about recovery, what happens for individuals, but also employers as well, if people are still off work sick. I'm just interested. I'm not seeing much data, but be interested to see if anybody else has seen that.
Andrew?
In terms of the analysis that we conduct, no, we don't receive any data on long COVID. It is simply the PHE data on current COVID case rates from the beginning of the pandemic until now. May well be that one of those things is something that either Public Health England, PHE, or the Office for National Statistics release at a more granular level later on, but that's not currently something I've either explored or received directly. So apologies, but yes, it's an interesting point.
Councillor Deborah Cooper. Deborah?
Thanks, Chair. I was just wondering, Andrew, whether, having looked through the slides, whether there was any gender breakdown on prevalence of the virus. And because I know that you and, you know, all the data points towards deprived areas who are having the most impact. Absolutely, but I wonder if there was also an imbalance in gender as well in terms of contracting the virus. I know the impact of the virus is felt by women mostly, as opposed to male prevalence of the virus as well. So I just wondered if in fact actually they contracted the virus more as opposed to men. Because they seem to be more impacted by them. And while I'm on, please can I wish the women on the call a happy International Women's Day today.
Yeah, thanks, Deborah. Yeah.
Hi.
Andrew.
Thank you. Sorry, that's a good question. Yes, there are differences in case rates. It's not something that we routinely pull out as part of that reporting. Just bearing in mind that I guess I'm here from a part of a kind of a transport and economic kind of impact perspective, rather than being a public health intelligence analyst. I know we're well equipped across the districts with those kind of skills. I think that nationally, yes, there is a bit of a difference in terms of rates by gender. Locally, it's not something that we've kind of necessarily explored, but there is a difference in terms of susceptibility and mortality, and that is publicly available information as part of the available from the ONS, the Office of National Statistics.
Anybody else? No. Mike Hawkins.
I thank you, Andrew, for the really great paper. I wonder whether there is anything else you're doing to sort of dive into it or to try and draw out some lessons for what this means for the actual economy of the city region, and in particular the sort of general view that we've been looking at JRF, amongst other things, is sort of the difference between people who are able to work from home versus going out to work, and actually what that tells us about the labour market of West Yorkshire specifically when compared to other regions. I wonder whether there's any work there that you're looking at in particular.
Yeah, sorry, that's a really good question actually, and something that as other people have asked us. So yes, we've been asked to look at the differences in the economic profile of West Yorkshire that might help explain why my first point was that COVID rates aren't falling fast enough and the link between kind of deprived communities. So yeah, I think the challenge with this is that data is really rather limited. We have just received some information as part of a published paper by the Institute of Transport Studies that looks at the propensity for home working. So we've now got that data, and that's based off occupation codes, and it's a methodology derived from work in the US. And the idea is they're looking at the propensity for people to work at home. Actual data, actual hard data on the number of people who can work from home is difficult to come by. So essentially, it's kind of modelled data. And yes, dead keen to look at that in respect of the relationship between COVID-19. There is a well-known fact here that was released by the ONS, which is there is a strong relationship between income and using that as a proxy ultimately for ability to work from home and COVID rates. Generally speaking, people on higher incomes are more likely to be able to work from home than people who are on lower incomes, which tend to be more like you have to be present at a particular location. And in which case, I mean, that links into deprivation as well. So, but there are some really challenging questions. Is it why is it that COVID rates aren't falling fast enough, or haven't until recently been falling fast enough within West Yorkshire? And what is it about the West Yorkshire either economic profile, demographic profile that links to that? And that's probably quite a complex issue actually when you try and break it down. I don't think there are nice, neat kind of relationships that you can draw out. But certainly the trend is that that we know that deprived communities are on lower rates of pay. They're more likely to work into jobs where you have to be physically at a location to do that job. You can't work as remotely. So there are potential links there. And I guess the questions are in terms of kind of greater business support. That's something that the Local Resilience Forum are exploring. Does that make sense?
Cal?
Yeah, just following on the same kind of theme, Andrew, thank you so much. But given that we've been in a prolonged period of lockdown, a lot of people haven't been going out to work, it would be useful for us to be able to understand a bit more about, you know, what are some of the key cause factors of these higher rates in West Yorkshire and in Bradford in particular, and to kind of dissect that kind of heading of deprived areas and what can we learn about, well, what is it about, you know, how does that depravity kind of manifest, you know, in a more definitive way, you know, connecting the link to higher rates and mortality. And also, given that, you know, there are other demographies similar to Bradford around the country, what learning and you know, examples and case studies are we able to identify from areas which are also suffering from some of these higher rates? I know that isn't necessarily your brief as such, but clearly the data goes somewhere. So it'd be useful to get an insight into what the thinking is about how we then respond to the data that yourself and colleagues have been, you know, putting together.
Yeah, sure. I can respond briefly to that, which is that's something that the local resilience forum is definitely exploring. Particularly your point about, you know, West Yorkshire certainly has greater than a fair share, shall we say, in terms of deprived communities, but that's not something that is unique to West Yorkshire. There are other parts of the country in that position. So why is it that we're not seeing necessarily the same degree, you know, of trends elsewhere in the country? Generally speaking, which is one of those charts in that pack I circulated, there is a relationship, but there is a bit of a linear relationship between the portion of the population in deprived communities and case rates. But there's quite a lot of play, and actually some of that stems from people's from the position we're in terms of going back to the tier system at the beginning of December. What's really quite interesting about West Yorkshire is that the prevalence of the new variant wasn't particularly high, we don't think, at the time of the last peak, and certainly the peak within West Yorkshire wasn't particularly high compared to other areas who were in a very different situation in terms of kind of lockdown. Some other things were open, for example, the hospitality sector was open. But you're absolutely right to pick up on the fact that, you know, what is it about, let's say, kind of deprived, let's say, hotspots, if I can use that word, across the whole of England, and how they're coping with changing COVID rates. Again, I apologise. This is not necessarily my area of expertise. I'm more interested in the kind of direct impact on transport and the economy, and other people are certainly better equipped than I am to understand the kind of the full kind of epidemiological nature of the spread of COVID. But I am aware the Local Resilience Forum is exploring these kind of things, particularly now that we're kind of receding from the tide of the last wave of COVID, if you like. And, you know, it's a bit more obvious now that certain areas certainly are, you know, the rates are not falling as fast. And one of those areas is definitely West Yorkshire. So now's the time to start asking those questions. Well, hang on a minute. Well, really, why is that the case? What is it about those areas? Is it related to home working, as somebody's already mentioned, or is there other things at play? One final thing to say, which might help actually, Carl, is that we fed the PhD data through a what's called a geodemographic segmentation tool that tries to pull out different characteristics associated with different postcodes. And one thing that's remained fairly common is that, yes, there are links to deprived communities, but there's also tends to be trends where the rates are highest in what is kind of, I guess, established now, which is kind of high density, overcrowded, kind of terraced estates. So there's elements there in relation to deprivation, which may well mean that, I know, people can't necessarily work from home, or they're unemployed, but they're also living in maybe overcrowded kind of high density houses where they don't necessarily have the ability to self-isolate, and moreover, maybe their access to green space is more limited if they're living in those kind of areas. And so that, you know, transmission is easier. These are just suggestions based on research that I've read. This is not my own work. Does that help? Okay.
Any more comments, observations, Rob Webster?
Yeah, thanks. Just a couple of things. I think Councillor Cooper earlier suggested there are differences in impact and on men and women, and Andrew followed that up. Just to confirm for the record that it's men who are more likely to die from COVID than women. So there's a gender balance that way. As we all know, men are the weaker sex when it comes to issues generally to do with health, and have longer years of ill health and shorter lives. And COVID's proven to be exactly the same. So just to say that is the case. I think there's a huge amount of public health data and insight, and Andrew's picked up on some of the factors that might have affected West Yorkshire. I think it's also important to say that this is our third wave that we're in and coming out of. Much of the country's had two. Us, South Yorkshire, parts of the Northwest have had three. So we got, before the Kent variant became the dominant variant, which it is now. So COVID is just the Kent variant now. It's what most people have got. We were already in a second wave of coronavirus. And that was greater than the first wave from last April. More people in hospital, more deaths. And coming out of that, as we got into Christmas, obviously the Kent variant then caused a significant upturn in infections, and then we had the lockdown. That we've seen a slow reduction, but from being behind the national average, now ahead of it, and we're seeing a long, slow landing. I saw that in Israel, where they've had three waves, their third reduction is also slower than elsewhere. But as Andrew said, one of the key material factors for us is low income, high density housing, and people who can't afford to isolate. So combining into a range of factors which cause us to have problems. What I would suggest is, if people are interested, we could get the public health teams to come and talk to us about what the outlook is for all of this for the future, because I think that would be a really useful thing to do. So maybe Kev Smith or somebody could come and do a session for us.
Yeah, no, good idea. We'll take that on. Is there any more questions or comments, observations before we move on?
Chair, may I ask a quick question?
Yes, Cameron, yes.
It's an observation, and I don't think I want an answer, but I wonder if there's any correlation between local authorities and their political leadership, and how areas with leadership which is the same as the national government, are they faring better than local authorities that have a different
I'll answer that in my I'll answer that actually, not now, but I've got a few things I need to come back on. But good point, very good point. It's everything's linked. Any more comments or observations or questions? Right, okay, what I think as a local authority leader and as a politician, and I think the politicians, I can say Deborah or anybody else, but you probably understand what I'm trying to say here. It is very complex, and Andrew makes a really, really, really good point. And I think that complexity, I'm glad that Rob's actually coming into that. He'll bring somebody from public health to talk to them in the future, and I think we need to actually understand that in more detail in terms of what exactly is happening. But my role as a leader is to actually unravel the complexity and make it simple, and then to get some clear, simple messages out. Because remember, what we're talking about is actually people's lives and people's livelihoods and everything else. And unless we make it very clear and very simple, and in terms of making sure people understand and see the benefits, then we miss a trick. And that's where I think the political leadership comes in as well. And I think I won't look at the different parties from a political leadership point of view. What I would say is look at the messages that certain leaders have actually come out with, and as opposed to the leaders who are actually directly picking the pieces on this. Now, again, it's not political comment, but I saw an MP in Parliament. I don't know where he was from. You're probably from an area where you've got more sheep than folk, and they just don't understand how the problem that we face in terms of class. It's a class issue. It's not just a BME issue. BME issues also matter. Poverty and deprivation, and I think Rob hit the nail on the head. It's the density of housing. So most of our properties in West Yorkshire are in Band A, so the lowest banding you can get, and they're in very close proximity with each other. And on top of that, and this is what I talked about right at the beginning. If you're working and you are on the lowest rung of the salary ladder, you're more likely to actually be working outside, and because you are working outside, you are more likely to actually get the infection. I actually have been quite fortunate because the first time I went down into Batley was a couple of weeks ago. I had to actually go and get a recorded delivery, and I couldn't do it online. And it was a year since I went into Batley, and Batley is my hometown, and I'm a councillor there. But I saw folk going on in Batley who were catching the bus and getting the taxi and doing all the normal stuff that people do because they've got no choice. And the isolation bit is very, very important as well, because how easy can they isolate if they have been found to be positive, they have no choice. And a lot of the initial infections where you had outbreaks were taking place in bed factories, were taking place in factories, packing centres, meat factories. In Kirklees, right? Yeah, there was a meat factory that is owned by Asda. So it wasn't a KPMG office in Leeds or Bradford or Addleshaw and Goddard. They were all shut. You wasn't in the local authority. However, we did have an outbreak in one of the police forces. I won't tell you where because you might know, you might not know. But again, the police force, although they are probably on a reasonable salary, they're actually working in communities, and you see the kind of abuse that people were giving the police in doing their job. And there was an outbreak in one of the forces. Luckily, they managed to capture it very early doors. And this is what I was saying. All the inequalities have always been there. They've actually been magnified. And part of the levelling up agenda was purely around levelling up to actually make sure that we do level up properly in terms of where the deprivations are, where the evidence is, and where the index of multiple deprivation, the top 10% of the worst wards in the country. We all know that, and that's where I think. And again, it's not a political point. This is just an observation, right? Yeah, this is what happened in the budget. That the levelling up agenda is somewhat being diluted and watered down. And that's what makes me worried that as we move forward, we need to actually engage more with a wider cohort of politicians. And that's where Cameron, your issue comes in. As a leader in Kirklees, it will be very easy for me to operate within a Labour leadership model and forget about the two Tory MPs that I have to work with. I am working with them because what I am going to do is I'm going to actually try and use them to the maximum. And they'll appreciate this as well, to make sure that this leveling up agenda isn't used to level up things that don't really need leveling up. And again, I don't want to go too much into that. He needs to level up around the massive inequality we face in our society. And one thing that I'm sure everybody will agree, irrespective of their political background, will be that this has affected certain groups more than it has affected some other groups. So I hope that sort of encapsulates everything that's come out from the conversation. And one final thing, I'm glad Rob mentioned a bit about men and women, and there are inequalities around women, but ever since this all started, the data I was given was it affects men more adversely. I don't know why that is. It's probably there'll be some expert that will tell you why that is. But when Deborah was talking, I'm thinking, God, has it changed? Has it gone all the way around? And I was starting into worry, thinking, God, have I missed some briefing? But I'm glad Rob came in because that is true. But having said that, there will be some evidence to say why that is. But one thing we know, even if it's men or women in West Yorkshire and other places that have a similar deprivation and social economic factors, will have the same kind of issues we have. And unfortunately, right, we are in a situation where now we have to put it right. But at the same time, there is an opportunity here. There is an opportunity for this panel moving forward. For a couple of years, I wasn't really clear what this panel was doing, and where's the focus and how do we influence that. And I think the answer is in the panel name. It's a policy panel. It's something that will actually shape and change and steer, rather than getting a pot of money and saying, right, okay, we're going to deliver this, this, and this. And I think that message is getting through, because the last LET board where I presented the update on inclusive growth. I think the messages were all unsure, and once you actually get all the ducks lined up, it's very, very easy then to actually start to put some meat on the bone. So we've got a massive agenda. So I hope that captured everything, and I hope that will now enable Andrew to go forward and take up Rob the excellent suggestion that we get public health here at a future date where we can actually understand the data a little bit more. Deborah, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to clarify what I were asking, because it seems to have been interpreted in different ways from what I said, actually. I was asking whether women contracted the virus and what the data was showing on that. Rob did point out the fact that more men are actually dying from the virus, and thank you to Rob for that. I've put that in the chat as well. But my question was actually about the gender balance in the contraction of the virus, Chair. That's a bit, and the reason I asked that is because predominantly women are having a worse impact in other ways, such as the economy, in terms of their work-life balance, in their caring responsibilities, and in other ways as well. That's why I asked the question about the gender balance for contraction of the virus, Chair, not necessarily about who fared better when they did contract it.
No, point well made, and I think, what point well made, and my apologies, but Rob, do you want to just try and clarify that a little bit, because I'm getting confused as well.
No, I think it's a great question. So how, the balance of, if you look at prevalence, are women more likely to contract it than men? I think that's linked to a whole host of factors. I don't have the data in front of me, but I'll be really interested in looking at it, Councillor Cooper. So if you look at some of the high-risk occupations that there are, in terms of working in kitchens, working in taxi firms, working in care, health and care workers, vast majority of them are women. 77% of NHS staff are women, for example. So it'd be really good to look at what the gender balance is. I just don't have that data in front of me at the moment. I think it's a really good question.
Yeah, and I think what we'll do is when we get public health to come here, I think that would be good, because we just need to understand and drill that down, because the message needs to be very, very focused and very, very clear. So from what Rob's saying and from what you're saying, Councillor Cooper, is although the message might have been X, is Y, and we just need to understand, and that's why I made the point at the end that, to me, it's actually, there's something happening in West Yorkshire. There's something happening around poverty, around housing, around jobs, around skills, that's impacting both men and women in West Yorkshire more adversely than it is anywhere else. But point well made, Councillor Cooper. We will get that information.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just posted a link to the data on high risk occupations, and I see Peter's posted a link on geographical differences from home working. But all those will be factors. I think, as you said, Councillor Pandor, what we've got to think about here is, why is it that high density, multi-generational households in deprived areas have the highest mortality, and we don't seem to be able to shake things off? And I'm really interested in those questions about, do people have the income that they need if they're forced to stay at home, or are they engaging in more risk-taking behaviour because they can't afford to be at home? So some of those things are very germane to what we're talking about, I think.
Yeah, I suspect it's the latter. I'm sure it's the latter. But anyway, just something else that we need to bear in mind before we move on to the next item is, if we are going to be living with COVID-19 for the foreseeable future, we don't want to get left behind as the economy and everything else opens. So my view is very, very clear that as long as the hospital admissions stay low, the deaths stay low, and all the other indicators stay low, and the pressure on the NHS is actually sort of like, as low as we can get it, then what we don't want to also do is because of our circumstances, get left behind. And that's a debate that, you know, I've been having in my local authority. However, if rates do go high and deaths do go high, and the NHS is actually coming under pressure, that's a different ballgame. But we just need to understand that, because every single part of the country and every single component within a local authority will be very, very different. And we just need to understand that, you know, there are complexities around, you know, balancing and reopening the economy versus the rates of infection that are taking place at the moment. And that's why one of the things I'm doing very, very clearly in Kirklees is everybody needs to get vaccinated. Because if we can get everybody vaccinated, then that will actually no doubt save lives and you know, minimize that impact that we're having. Anyway, let's move on to item 7. Sorry, yes, Cal. Yeah, we must move on. We still got another item, but carry on.
I'm just saying, I think Cully raised her hand. I don't know if it was an accident, but she raised her hand earlier, I think. I don't know if she wanted to say something earlier.
Cully, did you raise your hand? If you did, my apologies.
No, sorry, not me.
No.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I've got eyes like a hawk. I don't miss much. So I thought, bloody hell, you know, either my eyesight is going or Cal got better eyes.
Apologies, I thought you saw your hand.
Thank you. I just put a note in the chat. That's all in relation to the conversation we've just had. So that's all.
Yeah. Thank you, Cal. Thanks, Cully. Okay, item 7 is regarding the third sector hub. I think Cameron's been doing some really excellent work in his own hub, and what I'll do is I'll introduce Cameron, which we all know, Cameron Rashid, Impact Hub, who will be introducing this item. Cameron, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, 1 second. I've just seen Ben's made me host. So just like to start with, I think I've been given half an hour, 15 minutes to present, and then 15 minutes for questions and answers, and hopefully I'll honour that time. First of all, I'd just like to kick off with celebrating International Women's Day and congratulating all the women on the call, and including all the men on the call who have women in their life and are allies to women and support them. My biggest success in my life has been due to my mother, my sister, my wife, and my daughter. And today is an important day for them, but it's an equally important day for me as well. And we're going to talk about social entrepreneurship, and kind of on the theme of International Women's Day, just want to highlight that I'm proud that Impact Hub Bradford, we've been very, very successful in making women at all levels integral in our organisation, whether we've got a balance on our board, gender balance on our board, on our advisory board. We're finding that we're employing more women than we're employing men. And the social enterprise sector at large, 41% of social enterprises are led by women, and 89% employ women at director level. But I think that's just for International Women's Day. I want to take 15 minutes up, and I want to cover 3 things. One is about the development of Impact Hub Bradford. The second thing is around our ambition moving forward, and the third thing is around challenges. And to kick off with, I'm going to quickly play a 3.5-minute video. So if your sound's on, it gives you a good snapshot of what Impact Hub Bradford is, and then I'll take the remaining 10-11 minutes to cover off a few topics before leaving you an opportunity to ask questions. So hopefully this should work. Give us 1 second. There you go. And when I'm going to put the video on now, if you can see it, if you just if you can hear it and see it, please put your thumbs up.
Impact. It does what it says. It is about making impact.
Shout out to Cameron from 30 Chapel Street doing amazing things, creating a space for young entrepreneurs to come up and really express and actually help nurture them to grow their businesses.
Impact Hub Bradford is a membership organisation here in Little Germany, Bradford, that provides social entrepreneurs and those making a difference to our district in a positive way the support they need to be sustainable and to be thriving. We're going to do that by providing mentoring, workshops, training, and an inspirational place to work from, like the space we have here in Little Germany, Bradford, for them to be part of a community of change makers making this district great.
There are a lot of stories in the district of people doing some incredible things, but all they really need is that support.
It helps develop projects and initiatives that will inspire young people and help them decide what they want to do with their lives.
I found out about funding from Impact Hub that I was actually able to apply to and get the equipment that I need so that I can be able to tell my story.
I started coming into the building last year because I'm a stay-at-home mum, so I found that working from home just didn't work for me. I have just written a cookbook that specialises in Pakistani cuisine. Coming here and being with everybody that works here for me was the push that I needed to get the book finished.
Well, Impact Hub, it links you in with the best things that's happening in Bradford.
I didn't realise how much was happening in Bradford.
And just the amount of things that you can engage and get involved with. So I like the fact that you can get really your hands dirty into things.
The mindset, I think, is a lot about collaboration.
It's group working, it's networking, it's everyone local.
Although I've lived in Bradford all my life, you don't meet such a diverse group of people as you see here.
It's like good food, you know, you get all these different ingredients that come together.
Not just locally, but internationally, you are part of a larger community. So that's something that I really want to do. When I do travel into a country, I'd love to go and visit another Impact Hub and see how they're delivering in their area, in their district, in their city.
And if you're going to a city or a place where one of the Impact Hubs exists, we would connect you so you've got a place to work from.
I think this is really, really cool, and in Pakistan, definitely quite innovative.
So I knew of Impact Hub because I've been to the one in Sudan. It was just nice to kind of be in that space with creative people that I don't usually meet when I'm in Sudan.
Impact Hub's in over 100 locations, but if you think about a city like Bradford, Bradford has always been compassionate and supportive to the people who need it the most. Whether it was Sir Titus Salt's Workers' Village, the Independent Labour Party starting in the building on the other side of that wall there, or free school meals starting from our district.
And we're seeing all across the globe, change, unrest, disquiet. What we seem to need is a revolution in rebuilding our societies, and particularly start to build an entrepreneurial spirit around solving the world's big problems.
The success is not the launching of the hub or the building or having the space, but it's what comes out as a result of that. And if we're able to support people who make a difference, who then outgrow this space and go on to become sustainable deliverers of social impact in this city, then we've actually achieved a huge amount.
I think the future is about inspiring young people, inspiring older people who've lost their jobs, and then showing them what they can do. And actually they're all treasure chests of innovation and creativity, lacking confidence. So it's all about giving people confidence. It's for Bradford, it's for the city, it's for everybody.
I hope that gave you a good sense of what Impact Hub is, and I hope it reflects that we are truly inclusive and it's not just words. And when we talk about inclusion for us is not about engaging one community at the detriment of another or displacing that, and it's about really being inclusive. So what was our development? Oh, sorry, I think it's playing in the back. Sorry about that. I'll let it play on 1 second. 1 second, sorry. So yeah, the development of Impact Hub Bradford took us several years, and it came about after a personal challenge. And working from home is now the kind of thing that everyone's doing. But 4 years ago, I was working in London, 6 years ago, I was working in London and my daughter was born. And later that year, I kind of decided to be based at home more, and as well as being a worker, being a father and a husband, and working from home did that. I soon experienced a bit of burnout, and I wanted to set up a place which allowed me to work somewhere, work for myself, but be part of a community. But nothing existed in Bradford. I was aware of the Impact Hub network and what they do, so I'd started a journey on setting up an Impact Hub in Bradford, and that took me several years to do, and it took a lot of work. And one of the key things that we learned was that for us, it's more important to build a community than it is to build a building. You build a community, and once you've got a building, the community will follow. And I think too many times people fail when they put a lot of investment into bricks and mortar, but they don't put enough investment into how they build a community that's going to engage in that. Now, how Impact Hub was separate from a traditional business centre and was part of the reason I chose to kind of be part of this network and global movement was that traditionally business centres are defined by corridors and doors. You take an office, it has internet, and you have a postal service. You arrive, you go down the corridor, you're in your office, and that's about it. And for us at Impact Hub, a significant difference is that we've got an open plan workspace, which is as much about a place to work as it is about curating a community. So we really focus on how do we create connections and how do we provide a support program for our members. So a physical space is part of our offer, it's not our main offer. And we always make that crystal clear. What you're doing is you're joining a community, you're not paying for a desk and a chair and Wi-Fi, which is very different, I think, from traditional business centres. We're very fortunate that with the Impact of Global Network, that we are part of a global network, but our philosophy is a locally rooted organisation which is globally connected. And for us, it's really about how do we deliver impact both at a hyper-local, district and regional level. And that's really important to us, to be able to know that we're making a difference to the lives of people who are around us. Now, you know, one of the things which I mentioned when I first started speaking was that we support social impact makers and social entrepreneurs, and traditionally businesses measure success by the bottom line, how much profit they made, but the people and the organizations we're supporting, and I think in post-pandemic recovery is extremely important, we measure success by what's known as the triple bottom line. The triple bottom line is about how do we make an impact on people, planet, as well as profit. And we're really keen to support them organizations who can address some of the big pressing challenges in our communities. And one of the things we saw during the pandemic over the past 12 months is that a number of impact organizations have been at the forefront, whether that's been food banks, food distribution, digital literacy and getting people digitally connected, mental health and well-being support, domestic abuse support. But how do we make sure that these organizations are not dependent and reliant on funds and grants, but are a little bit more innovative and think about how can they generate income? So our work has been about how do we build the programs that support these organizations to be more sustainable, more resilient. Let me just see if I've a couple of examples of people we've supported. We've supported a young woman who came to us with an idea, was based here, and we quite quickly started supporting her. She got her company registered. We supported her with the governance and an accounting. We gave her connections into potential board members and people who then became her directors. We supported her with small pieces of work to start with, just to get established, to get into their network. And now she runs an organization where she's employing herself. It's a micro business, but she's created an employment opportunity for herself. And she has an organization which now delivers impact in our district. Or there was someone like there was another woman that came to us who was running a cycling campaign to get more people from inner cities of Bradford cycling. We quickly got her connected to mentors with Adidas on the global, Adidas global team through our global membership at Impact Hub. And we were also able to secure her £10,000 worth of grant to help her launch her business. And there's a number of examples like that. Now, our ambition moving forward is that we want to continue to develop what we've done and build on our success. So last week, or just over a week and a half ago, we launched a program called Sustain, and Sustain is a collaboration with PwC. We're looking at supporting 12 organizations who are social impact deliverers in our district. And it'll be a 6-month program of action learning sets, mentoring, masterclasses, membership to our hub here in Little Germany, and access to resources. And that's about supporting organizations through the transition out of response and into COVID recovery. And if we believe if we can support them in these next 6 to 9 months, it'll give them more ability to be sustainable longer term. We're looking at launching a number of programs starting supporting early stage entrepreneurs. One of the things we've learned is that, well, there was actually a report that was put out by Prince's Trust, from what I understand, in 2017. And it says that 83% of the millennial generation and Generation Z are more, 83% are more likely to want a job or a career or work for an organisation that delivers social impact as well as making profit. So we believe that our work around raising the profile as social enterprise and social entrepreneurship as a career option has a huge amount of potential, and especially if you consider in a place like Bradford district, where 50% of our population is under the age of 25. So we want to help raise the profile of social entrepreneurship. And our ambition is to grow out of Bradford, to be able to have more of a regional focus where we can support Leeds, Kirklees, Calderdale and Wakefield. I remember going to a talk and saying, you know, if you go into some of these global cities across the world, you know, a city there will start from Leeds and finish in Manchester, and it's everything in between. And I think sometimes we can get a little bit, you know, too focused on our own district, but thinking regionally, I think, is in everyone's benefit, and using, you know, thinking that the sum is greater than the parts. For us, we understand that we've got the potential to make an impact at a regional level as well. Now, doing what we've done has not been without its challenges. And, you know, there's three main challenges which I'd like to highlight. Now, if anyone is interested, there's a lot more to this backstory and what we're doing, but I'm just mindful that of time and trying to stay on time and leaving an opportunity for people to ask questions. But the main three challenges I want to speak about is, you know, we launched during a pandemic in August 2020, and that really kind of prevented us from earning our income. And as a social enterprise, we do get grants and commission, and we win commissions, but we also generate income. And we generate income by selling membership to our hub, renting out office space, meeting space, and event space, but also running our own events. So we, for example, last year, were due to deliver our second iteration of TEDx Bradford, and that would generate us an income. Now, launching during a pandemic, we've not been able to sell membership, we've not been able to open our doors for events, meetings, training, and our TEDx license, we've had to extend it, and we weren't able to do a big profile event, which would help us generate income. So that was the first challenge. The second challenge, which I think everyone's experienced, is that everything is just taking longer. Getting that meeting with someone, trying to develop a program, getting a response from a commissioner, a funder, everything's taking longer for, you know, if it's not part of the COVID response, everything else is just put on a back burner and not a priority. So that's been a second challenge. The third challenge, which I think is quite an interesting challenge, is that we've launched during a pandemic, and we made that decision. We could have launched at a later stage, but one of the reasons we launched during a pandemic is we wanted to be an organisation that helps raise the confidence and ambition of the people who see what we're doing and think if they can do it, then when we can do it as well. But the third challenge has been that actually worked, and there's been a huge amount of interest from people wanting to explore partnerships with us, wanting to do stuff and work with us. But it's been about capacity and having the capacity to grow and scale. And I think there's a huge amount of potential. And as a small organisation in a nascent market, I think it's about understanding that there's so much we can do, but without the capacity, you know, we're not able to achieve that potential that's there. And I guess we're now in us as an organisation, we're scaling up, and we're ready now to start really delivering impact and make sure that what we do is sustainable long term and can deliver the best possible offer for our region. I think we've got a really compelling offer. I think if you noticed in the paper, there's two impact hubs in London, one in Inverness, and we're kind of in God's own country in the middle of the UK, and I think we're well positioned to do some great work. Like you saw in the video, I'm proud to say that Bradford has got a heritage of compassion, of serving and helping people, but it was also a city that was economically very prosperous in the late 1800s, and I think that heritage speaks nicely to the work that we want to do and what we want to achieve. Now, I'm conscious I've spoke for a bit there. I've also, and it's no excuse, I've just got a bit of a throbbing tooth pain today, which has made it a little bit more harder, but I hope that gives you a good overview and insight into what we're doing, where we've come from, where we are now, and what we hope to do in the future, including some challenges. But before I share anything else, I just welcome any questions anyone may have.
Right, thanks, Cameron. Really powerful video actually, and it shows that your commitment and your passion comes out in everything. Any questions or comments? I think that's a really good example that you gave. That what can a hub like yours do at a local level, with the right energy and support and motivation and community buy-in, because inclusivity is all about community. If the community cannot see the benefit, and if you can't address the issues that you're addressing, then you're missing the point about inclusivity. So, you know, the power of community, the power of partnership, the power of collaboration was very, very clear in your video. So thank you very much. And if you've got a throbbing tooth pain, you know, you need to see a dentist really quickly. You know, we don't want you to actually, you know, go into a worse situation than what you've got. You're very brave. If I had a toothache, I'd have been out by now and gone to see my dentist. So anyway, Deborah, you got your hand up, Councillor Deborah Cooper.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Cameron, for a really good presentation. I've got to say about the work that you started and that you're hoping to continue even stronger after the pandemic. And also thank you for recognising the role of women in what your experience has been on International Women's Day as well. So thank you for that. Really interested in what your plans would be about recovery. So I know how difficult it's probably been over the pandemic for you, as you just launched during it, but actually in terms of recovery you could have, you know, real role to play in the city and in the city region, I've got to say, you know, to help others to network and particularly smaller social enterprises that you talked about as well. I'd really welcome a conversation with you outside this panel maybe, and like to invite you to come and talk to our third sector partnership in Leeds about the work that you've been doing in Bradford as well. And really sorry that you've got a toothache, so you don't have to answer everything now, Cameron, but really would welcome a conversation with you to take things forward and maybe how you might be able to help us in Leeds as well.
May I respond, Chair?
Yes, come on, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. First of all, I'd be privileged to come along and share my experiences. I lived in Birmingham 3 years, and when I moved back, I just remember finding a new love for Leeds, and I used to work there and I studied there, and all my nightlife and evening time was in Leeds. So any chance to kind of come in and out of Leeds, I love it, and I'll absolutely be privileged to come across and speak. I think, you know, part of recovery, the role, I think the work that we're doing is important. I think one thing that the pandemic has done has heightened people's awareness of social impact and what just becoming more socially conscious consumers or socially conscious citizens. And I think if we look at major corporates are now promoting their social impact before they promote their business. So for example, you'll see a Kenko advert and they'll talk about the young people in South America, they're preventing going into gangs before they speak about coffee, or you see organizations like Persil talking about ocean litter and ocean, you know, recycling before they talk about Persil. And there's loads of examples where businesses are now become very mindful of their impact. And I think coming out of a pandemic, out of response into recovery, I think corporates as well as communities will increasingly be thinking about what is the difference we're making to society? What difference are we making at a local level? And I think two just prime examples of where we can use this to our benefit is that the Social Value Act of 2006 really puts an emphasis on procurement and commissioning and how we use that to make sure that contracting is given to organisations that demonstrate local impact as well as delivering against the contract. And we hosted Claire Dove, who's the Queen's representative for that piece of work, and we hosted her for a roundtable last February. And I think that's an opportunity for our region to think about how we use that work to really get our corporates thinking about this as well. There was a second point, and I think the two take.
I think
there was a second
Deborah's,
point, but it's just I've just come
what Councillor Cooper, said, I think you've addressed that, and I think this is a conversation that she'd like to take offline. So I'm sure there'll be more that you can share. I'm just conscious of time. Is there anybody else? Rob Webster?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Don't know if you can see the hands or not, but thanks for that, Cameron. I thought it was really excellent, and I think we've got to tap into the potential of people really in all that we do, and just I guess 3 offers that we could take up really to connect things together. So the first is that part of economic recovery, we know that we're going to have to get much better at connecting the health and care system to places that people can't find employment. So what we've got at the moment is this thing where we've got organisations that can't get staff and people can't get jobs, and we've got to try and marry those two things up a bit. And Joe Webster and John Ebo are doing some thinking about, what's the role of health and care in all of the economic recovery. And if we see health and care as an investment, not a cost, we might make some progress there. So there's probably some links that we can make there. I think the second is that the Academic Health Science Network are trying to look at how do you facilitate, SMEs and entrepreneurs to get to buyers, if you like, into the market. And I think, connecting the hub to the HSN, if you've probably not already, but if you haven't, would be a really positive thing. And then I think the third is that in Leeds, we're fortunate that we've got Habitat, which is, it's situated at Platform 1 at the station. It's actually a West Yorkshire and Harrogate health and care development. And what it tries to do is connect citizens to the digital agenda and, developments to the digital agenda. And I'm sure that there'll be people that you're connected to who would benefit from connecting into that if they haven't already. So I guess those there's a big picture thing, then there's a kind of HSN thing, and then there's an Habitat thing, which I'm sure we could make some connections on that would really help. But I thought it was really fantastic, the work you're doing.
Thank you, Rob. Chair, may I quickly respond before you move on? So the quick point, Councillor Cooper, was Pro Bono Economics are leading a piece of work. Lord Gus O'Donnell and Andy Haldane, Chief Economist of Bank of England, are running a commission on the future of civil society, and I was kindly invited to sit on a national technical panel which informs them commissioners. It's a 2-year commission, and the big thing that they're hoping to achieve out of that is how they position the civil society with equal stature as public and private sectors. So I think it really shows you that there's a commitment to this work and that this work is important moving forward. I think the 3 offers, Rob, that you've made, that's really kind, and I think it just demonstrates and reinforces the point which I made earlier on, that if you imagine I put out a LinkedIn post or the video was shared, or I give a talk and we had 70, 80 people on it, my inbox goes crazy. I get 70, 80 messages a day. My LinkedIn's gone a bit crazy at the moment. And I think the challenge I put out to the sector is that we have got a huge, and I mean a huge amount of potential. The Global Network has a global program, for example, called Accelerate 2030, which was co-designed with the United Nations. And it's about delivering impact against the Sustainable Development Goals. And I could deliver talks on this all day, but without boring you, the potential here is absolutely immense. The network we've got, the intelligence we've got, the globally leading social innovation we've got access to. And for me, the challenge is how do we, at a local, district and regional level, make use of that? And that should not exclusively sit with us. However, for us to be the conveners and curators of that, it does take time, and there is issues around capacity, which is again going back to the point I raised about challenges. Now, if we were able to have capacity in our organisation, anyone that was interested was saying, okay, we are prepared to support you on this journey. And we believe in co-designing, co-developing, and co-delivering. This is not about, you know, holding power, but it's about kind of curating and convening networks. If we're supported to realize that potential, I think we can make a huge impact in our district. And I think I believe the work that we're doing is, number one, we are in quite a niche market here, but also I think it's extremely complementary to programs such as Build, which is, you know, being delivered at a regional level, which is about high growth entrepreneurship and pure enterprise. But I think the work we're doing, working alongside programs such as Build and others, we can make this region really stand out on what we're doing and really put compassion back at the heart of our growth, our economy, and our recovery post-pandemic. And my challenge to the people on this call and your networks is that the potentials there, help us realize that by kind of investing in our capacity so we can give back to our region. Yeah. Thank you.
Right, thanks, Cameron. And I think you posed some very good challenges. One of the things that I've picked up is each local authority needs to actually learn and develop the work that we've heard from what you're talked about, and we also went to the All Fire Station, and you know, that's where the voluntary community sector strategy is very important. We've actually started to refresh ours within Kirklees, and that's where we need to actually start look at how we can influence that wider piece. And you're right, it should be at a local authority level that's actually nurtured, because every single local authority will be operating differently. That's really good. Thanks a lot. We'll move on to the next item, which is economic response. Purpose of the report is to actually understand the proposals around promoting entrepreneurship, and how this is designed around the inclusivity agenda as much as possible, and to identify the opportunity for additional complementary activity around the inclusive growth proposals, for example, boosting the social enterprise. We've got Henry Rigg on the line. I can see him, Henry. Welcome, Henry. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I'll get straight into it, because I think James has said we're just trying to keep on track with time. So basically, we're looking to introduce some additional enterprise support into the West Yorkshire region. The funding would come through the gain share funding for 2021. And we're really trying to develop what we've called a ladder of enterprise. We had a workshop on this with several parties who've got experience and expertise in and around the enterprise agenda a few weeks ago, and we were glad that Carl Oxford could represent this panel at that workshop, where we looked at the various different options available. And we got into this idea of a ladder of enterprise with 3 work streams that integrate with one another and are embedded with one another, and can take somebody on that whole journey. From initially, work stream 1 is about exploring enterprise, understanding what it takes to set up a business, finding out if it's the right thing for you, and if you've got a business idea that has got some legs, helping you maybe with some of the market research to understand that there is a need there. Work stream 2 is then for those people who do want to set up a business. They know exactly what business they want to set up, but they need some practical help and support to set that business up. And that can be a business in any sector. The enterprise, the founder of the enterprise can be from any background, but we would definitely be looking to focus on some underrepresented groups, maybe at women in enterprise, maybe at young people, and certainly people from BAME backgrounds, and looking at different models of enterprise as well, including social enterprise, as has been mentioned. And then, so then there wouldn't be a focus on growth there. That could be somebody who wants to set up a business. They're not necessarily talking about it becoming, you know, the next Tesla or whatever. It's a business that's worthy, but is not necessarily talking about creating a lot of new jobs and increasing turnover year on year. The third work stream, and Cameron mentioned Build there, would be very much in that high growth space. This is where we are looking for entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs who have got that ability to grow a business and scale it up pretty quickly because of their enthusiasm, their their business idea, the support that they can access. And that's the ladder of enterprise that we're looking to introduce there, building on lots of good practice, current good practice, previous good practice, and trying to give people that opportunity to progress a business if they so wish, and then to progress it into high growth if they so wish. So that's the proposal. We're still at a fairly early stage in this. It's not been determined what the delivery model is going to look like, whether it's going to be commissioned or procured or whatever. It's basically we're here now to try and get some feedback from yourselves about how we can make this program of support as inclusive as possible, which is why, with James's help, we crafted a few questions there that are in the paper, which I think would help us to understand how we can make this provision as effective as possible. So I'll leave it there, Chair, if that's okay, and happy to take questions or to look at the questions in the paper.
Right, thanks, Henry. Any questions or comments, observations? Please raise your hand, let me know. Mike, you got your hands up? Hand up.
Great, thank you very much for sharing this. A couple of really quick comments. One is, would the programme include advice around access to finance and other sorts of funding? Because we know that that's actually, a huge barrier to many businesses establishing themselves and setting up. The second is there any links across to some of the work around good jobs and work quality? So again, like a lot of the evidence is that, particularly for businesses that might be scaling up quite quickly or trying to actually recruit people, most people actually don't know how. They might want to be good employers, but they don't know how to do it. So can some of that be brought into it? And I think the third, I suppose my third prompt is about the types of business models that this sort of program might support or encourage. So you talk about social enterprise, but other types of, is there a way in which other types of ownership models or structures like employee ownership or cooperatives could be brought into this sort of model as well? So it's not just like a vehicle just for owner managers and those sorts of things, but actually could expand into different types of business models as well.
Yeah, very good points. Yeah, certainly. I think we'd certainly need some help on the second of those points, Mike. Definitely the access to finance, investment readiness support, definite link there. We'd definitely be having something in that space, and we should definitely look at different models, like you mentioned there, about employer ownership, etc. We're proposing to have a development fund as part of this, which could fund initiatives and projects to look at innovative new ways of delivering the support, including piloting different models, which could be something as you've described. Thank you.
Right, thanks a lot. Any more comments, Cal?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Henry. I think it's an excellent paper. Thank you so much. And like the earlier papers and contributions preceding it, it gives a lot of encouragement that there is a genuine desire to be creative, ambitious, lateral thinking. And, I've seen keywords like best practice and, kind of learning from other good examples. So all of those things kind of resonate very, very strongly with myself, and I'm sure other committee members. I think those questions that you've put in the paper are relevant. I don't know if we could kind of respond to some of those now, Chair, if that's okay. Is that the thinking, Henry?
Yeah, certainly now or after, happy to have conversations after or take feedback.
I mean, in answer, your answer to Mike is quite right. There's work to be done after this stage in terms of being more definitive in the how to deliver a lot of these strategic aspirations. I very much agree. And just reflecting back on Cameron's example of the Impact Hub, I think it's an excellent example of just, what practically the third sector can do and do very well within the whole economy ecosystem. And, someone who's been involved in these kind of non-profit and profit-making kind of environments over the last nearly 30 years, you know, Cameron's quite right. You know, the embryonic part of it is the community, and the community kind of will not change, even though the structures will very much change. So, you know, this is the power and strength that we have, and why we should really support the third sector strategy as we've kind of presented it as an inclusive growth panel. We need to highly recommend it, you know, the plans to the LET board for endorsement and support. In terms of the, you know, the enterprise strategy, I also believe we should do the same, but make it not generalistic. And the problem that we do have, we always have the data, just like we had the earlier discussion on COVID stats. The data tells us all that we unfortunately need to know, but then it's how we respond to it. And we can't continue to respond in a blanket way to clear demand and need out there in the communities. So going forward, we do need to bespoke and tailor the strategies appropriately. And picking on those areas that you've talked about in your paper, Henry, about underrepresented groups who are least likely to start enterprises, but unfortunately most likely to fail. Areas where we can, you know, raise out a lot more talent and ability in our communities, including in the third sector, whatever form that might take, as Mike has also mentioned. So, you know, those are my thoughts personally. I highly recommend and strongly recommend our committee to put that to the LET board and for the strategy, you know, to be supported, endorsed and put forward for support resource-wise.
Thanks, Carl. Andy, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, just totally agree. Thank you, Carl. Be very happy to have more detailed discussions. I think there's still, like I say, some way to go before we get into the detail of what the delivery will be.
Yeah, and even after this meeting, if people have got any comments, get in touch with Henry, because you know, you might not be able to think of everything now.
Please do.
That doesn't mean to say that the door's shut. You know, there is still room. Mike.
Sorry, one other thing that I just thought of, particularly in relation to that, reaching communities that aren't traditionally engaged in this sort of thing. I think a lot of the evidence suggests that the best people to engage those communities in particular are often people from those communities themselves. So I think trying to come up with really good role models, really good ideas about how to get into that would be really positive, I think, to really focus in on that aspect.
Agreed.
The briefing I was given, I'll bring in Cameron. The briefing I was given says meeting closes at 3:30, so we've got 30 seconds. Is that okay, folks? Yeah. Anyway, Cameron.
I'm actually happy. I thought that I had the meeting scheduled for 4. I feel like I've just won half an hour.
No, it's not.
Just a
I'm just
couple
thinking
of
loud, right? Yeah, you know, we had, you know, the briefing I was given, right? Yeah, says 3:30, but no, I'm here till 4.
Couple of quick points. First one, just picking up from Mike's point, there was a piece of research done recently in America where they found African Caribbean women were 4 times more likely to lose a child in delivery and giving birth, or in the first 12 months. That statistic was halved if the person who was providing that primary care to the woman during and after birth was also African Caribbean. And I think it reflects that if we're talking about inclusive growth and we're talking about reaching the most underserved communities in our district, if we are able to have people from them communities supporting, and it picks up from Mike's point, I think we will do, you know, infinitely better at supporting and engaging them. I think the other point which would be good to probably see in the strategy is that there's a network and there's existing services which kind of meet some of the points which you've highlighted, and without kind of having to replicate them, how does this program help people navigate the enterprise support landscape throughout the region? Because if someone else is providing great support, they're providing great support. And I think finally, it's like, how do we triage? So if someone comes in, that we're able to assess and do a diagnostics that we know, is this program the right one for them? Or do we actually signpost them elsewhere? And maybe having a central function that's able to perform that, I think would be useful. there is a couple of other thoughts, but I think, you know, again, just respecting the time, I'll stop there.
Cameron, you can. I think this item could deserve, you know, the next item probably, hopefully, will. The meeting, you're right, is scheduled for 4, and not a problem. So if you wanna bring your other 2 points in, and please do so. You'll get used to my virtual chairing skills. My humour doesn't come out in the best, so don't take it. I'm trying to curtail debate. I'm all happy for further conversation.
I think for me,
make your point, Cameron.
I think for me, what's fundamentally important is that I'm someone who comes from civil society, third sector. So the entrepreneurial sector is something which is more new to me. And for me, it's always been about serving the communities and serving those that are being, you know, traditionally underserved. And what would be, I think, set this program, you know, apart from other LEPs in the country, and kind of, if we were seen as a pioneering place, would be if we really saw the VCSE sector as an integral part of enterprise and not an afterthought. And if you kind of consider 2 points, which is one, over the past 12 months, the civil society and the third sector has been absolutely integral in providing the most needed support to the most vulnerable in society. And also, if you kind of get, you know, there's a real life example I quote of someone who's from my community. You know, I currently live in inner city Bradford, a single mum of one who separated from her partner, wasn't working, was dipping on a slope of depression, wasn't able to support her daughter, was on housing benefits, and then got a job at a logistics centre. Now, it was a manual job, but just because of having a job and being able to earn her income, her health and well-being improved, which then takes off the burden of, you know, of our NHS. She was able to provide support to her daughter whose education improved because she had a laptop, or she had, you know, 1 hour's private tuition a week. And I think we shouldn't underestimate that actually the relationship between the public, the private, and the third sector is a hand and glove one, and it's not an afterthought or an add-on after the program's been developed, like we'll work that. And I think for me, that's fundamentally important to recognise that we're all working for improving our communities. And I joined this panel, which is about actually how do we level up everyone, and not just the north, but intra-levelling up and community levelling up as well. So just a couple of thoughts there.
Yeah, Henry, do you want to make a comment, or is it all valid what Cameron says?
Just really valuable feedback. Yeah, valuable feedback. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, just one thing that I want to talk about in terms of this, you know, the research you talked about, Cameron, regarding Afro-Caribbean women 4 times more likely to die in birth. That's what I was saying right at the beginning. Because a lot of that research was done on, I think the methodology in terms of the research was all wrong. And I'll tell you why I say that. This was based on people's perceptions. When you actually looked into that, it was more about how the system was unconsciously biased in making certain assumptions about Black women from a Black and Afro-Caribbean background. Yeah, you know, it was like a given, it was a norm. And that's how the system was geared. So basically, right, yeah, if a woman was in pain, they'd think that because she's a Black woman, you know, she can actually endure more pain. And by the time the medics got round to her, you know, she died in birth. And this is some of the thing that came out. A lot of the research stuff that comes out from America, although it's got professionals who are actually doing the research, it's loaded completely in a way, right? Yeah, that's completely biased, which I don't think happens in this country, to be honest with you. You know, so it's a different, completely different mindset. Having said that, we still need to do a lot of things. So that was the point I was making at the beginning. Carl, you had your hand up. Do you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. Just responding to Cameron's point, and I'm sure, Henry, you've got it in mind, but just to be clear from, you know, my perspective, to be honest, the way that we demonstrate that equity and of role and contribution that the third sector can play is also by applying budget to it, as we would do with other aspects of the enterprise strategy. So similar to the, you know, clearer areas like high growth, support to high growth, if we were able to, you know, argue for a budget for the third sector and how that stimulates enterprise and jobs, and that would be great, as well as the other aspects of the enterprise challenge that you've mentioned in the paper, Henry. So, just to practically kind of add that to the sentiment, not your sentiment, I'm talking about the notion of, doing things differently going forward and doing things better going forward. Does that make sense? Would that be possible?
Yes, makes complete sense. Henry, is there anything you want to add, or is that again valid points? I think. Anything?
Yeah, valid points. And the other thing to say is this is some investment we've managed to secure from year one of Gain Share. There's another 29 years. There's the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. There's plenty of other opportunities for us to collectively bid for funding to strengthen this, because it's more than a drop in the ocean. It's much more significant than that. But there's a lot more that needs to be done to support enterprise and social enterprise within this part of the world, without a doubt.
Okay, Rob, your hand up.
Yeah, so very much want to pile in on the principle first. The third sector, VCSC, is part of, the social fabric, and it is a significant part of the economy. And what we must do is invest in it. Over the last year, we've seen, particularly as people said, the enterprise of the third sector, the capacity of the third sector, and the connections of the third sector have been invaluable because they've helped us support people in every community. 111,000 people have been shielding in West Yorkshire, and the offer has been given to them by the councils, the NHS, and the third sector, with third sector organisations first to step up in many cases. So I think if we want to talk about reach into communities, connection with communities, with people plugging gaps, just because that's what a lot of third sector organisations are born out of, a gap that was filled by people frustrated by the fact that they weren't getting what they wanted, as you said, Councillor Pandor, for various reasons, then I think we've got to invest in it. So the parallel with the West Yorkshire Harrogate Health and Care Partnership is the third sector is an equal partner. It sits on the board, it sits on every place, it's at every level, and we've invested in it. So when the pandemic hit and we saw that the third sector had faced some fairly catastrophic, in some instances, loss of income because of retail and other things, we put money in. So I just think if we're serious about this, we need to think very carefully about saying, in principle, this is part of the social fabric, part of the economic fabric, part of what we do around here, and practically there's some investments that are probably required to support it.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. Henry, anything you want to add?
No, I think I totally agree with that. I think support for the third sector is critical across all our areas of work. Obviously, this is about using the right delivery partners to provide support to new start businesses, which could be conventional and social enterprises. But it's not on its own. It's not here. It's not a vehicle to support the third sector across West Yorkshire on its own. But I do strongly believe that it has a vital contribution to the enterprise agenda.
Yeah. So just I think there's often a sense of social enterprise and third sector organisations somehow being solely based on charities, and that I think it's the power dynamic. So it is about people choose to be a social enterprise because they want to give something of social value back. I think Cameron mentioned the Social Value Act. So this is capacity. It's not a freebie for charitable organisations. This is capacity we have to tap into.
And I think it's just one final point, please, Chair. I think it's equally important to recognise that because an enterprise has come out of a so-called more disadvantaged area, doesn't necessarily mean that that person should be a social entrepreneur. They might just want to run a really successful business and make a lot of money, and that's perfectly credible and valid as well. So we need to embrace all potential delivery models and types of enterprises.
Yeah, I think you're probably reading my mind. Are you sure you're not reading my mind, Henry? One of the points I want to make in closing was social enterprise is usually sort of classed as how can I put it? in the pecking order of what we're talking about at the bottom. And I think we need to understand, right, yeah, that you know, there's a saying, isn't there, that if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. So we need to recognise and value what exactly they can contribute to, and actually value it, you know, in a reasonable sort of, you know, remuneration package. You know, it all adds up to the usual arguments, because usually what happens is the voluntary community sector and social enterprises, to my mind, they get exploited, you know, and if you look at it from a different point of view, if it wasn't for the sector and the voluntary community sector and social enterprise and you know, the spirit of people want to do something over the last 12 months, we'd have been in a really bad situation. And that's where my thinking is, that we need to actually nurture it and you know, make sure we reward it properly. And that's what any modern civil society should expect. Everything, it's like if you get a machine, highly efficient machine will take every single one of its components as important. It's like a body, every single part is important. It's not just about the head or the brain or the other organs, and that's what a healthy society should be doing. Because if one part of that society doesn't function properly, it affects everybody. There was an article, you probably read it in one of the local national papers. Oxfam did a piece of research that on the back of the pandemic, top 10 billionaires have actually even become more rich, and they've created £500 billion worth of wealth. And one example, a couple of examples is, for example, Amazon. If say Amazon gave £105,000 bonus to every single one of their staff, they would not, or whoever runs Amazon, would not be any worse off. And if that wealth was put into the global economy, every single person would actually get the vaccine twice over, you know. So it just makes you see how unequal the world is. Obviously, we can't control the world. We can try, but we can start somewhere with the city region, and you know, if we can crack that nut, we'll have actually done a lot of good for everybody in our region. And before I get onto my soapbox, I'll move on, unless somebody else wants to say anything else. Just put your hand up, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just the point I think Henry made about this being from gain share, and I think really important, and I hope that the city region, having signed the devolution deal and leaders back this, that we've got the opportunity now through gain share to perhaps take a more experimental and longer term though approach to entrepreneurship and enterprise, and not necessarily be dictated to is the wrong word, but, you know, kind of shaped by national funding pots and competitions which periodically come and go. I think if we can try and build something, a real cultural change through resources that you would hope that the city region has more control over, Chair, I think that's genuinely the way to go. And you can, you know, the city region can determine what its priorities are, and we've got some real opportunity here. So I think that's a valuable thing.
Yeah, completely agree. Henry? Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree. And moving away from reliance on funding sources that have made business to consumer type operations more difficult for us to support, when we have you know, a large retail and hospitality sector that's been hammered by the pandemic. We need funding streams that can support all businesses and not exclude those that need it the most.
Yeah, thanks. Rob, is that your virtual hand up, or is that just you got your virtual hand up? I
think I just put a thumbs up, didn't I?
Oh yeah. Oh, sorry, it was a virtual hand up, right? Yeah.
One of them.
I thumbs it up. Is that right? Yeah, and then you had that. Let me see. I've got them both. And you got them both now. So that's thumbs up.
Oh yeah. I'll put my hand down.
Okay. Yeah. It'll change again. I don't know if you noticed, but Zoom, every so often they update the software and it's got some other features in. And you're sometimes thinking, God, how do I put my hand up? And you're left in limbo trying to think how to do it. Anyway, I think that's been a good discussion. But if you have got any more thoughts, any comments, please feed them in to Henry, because this is not a static piece of work. This is not going to be gathering dust. This is a dynamic living document. We just need to make sure that we get it through the combined authority. But the acid test will be what comes out of the other end. And there's huge opportunities for everybody. Item 9 is employment and skills framework in relation to the new skills and employment policy and the program that the LEP is going to be designing to deliver the inclusive economic recovery framework. We've got Ian Smythe, Head of Economic Services. I can only read part of your title, but I'm sure you'll tell us what you do. Ian, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So, given time, I'll perhaps make this an introductory item to a much longer conversation over a period of months. Firstly, apologies from Sonia Midgley, who's the Policy Manager for Employment and Skills, who's been working with the Employment and Skills panel. She couldn't make it today and apologises that you've got me instead. But she says she's been working on this for about 9 months with the Employment Skills panel. The reason we have this plan is because the Employment Skills panel is our designated skills advisory panel, so it has to have a plan. And when the plan was set, the outgoing plan was set back in 2016, 2015, 2016, the world was a much more stable place. Well, the country was, and the issues around skills and employment, and it was backed up by quite a detailed action plan about what we need to do about the employment and skills challenges. Where we've ended up today with this revised plan is to actually call it a framework, and that reflects some of the key uncertainties that are in this landscape. Firstly, around the challenges that have got to be addressed through our skills and employment interventions. The landscape we're working within West Yorkshire, where we have a number of other plans that have been developed in the meantime to tackle some of these issues in more detail than you can deal with in a high-level plan. So things like delivery agreements with colleges. The economic recovery plan talks a lot about employment and skills, and we've got the adult education budget strategy, which has come about as the result of the devolution agreement. We also have some people working on detailed plans, for example, around digital skills through the local digital skills partnership, and plans to develop specific proposals around issues around the over 50s, the need to develop green skills and high level skills. And finally, the government landscape, education landscape is quite changeable at the moment. There's a DfE-led white paper with a huge number of education reforms in it out at the moment, and we're expecting a further white paper on devolution. So what we're proposing, and is going to combined authority tomorrow hopefully for adoption, is a framework approach where we set out the evidence, the challenges that we're trying to address, the progress that's been made to date, what are a revised vision and priorities, and having an inclusive growth, digital skills and net zero carbon are cross-cutting themes through those priorities. It gives some detail around our objectives and how we're going to measure it with that measurement aligned with our strategic economic framework and economic recovery plan. So that's how so it's more of a high level framework, albeit the document itself is reasonably lengthy. And what the purpose of bringing to the panel today, and why I say this could be an introductory conversation for many further conversations over the months, is how do the panel see this panel playing into some of the key issues that are identified in the paper? What are the must-dos to make sure that this bedrock of skills being a bedrock of inclusive growth comes about? And how can we tackle some of the challenges specifically around things like needs, barriers to disadvantaged learners? How do we encourage participation? I'm happy to take any feedback today or offline or in future meetings, and we'll feed that through into the many work streams that we've talked about, and we can come back and talk about in detail some of those specific things. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. Any questions, comments, observations? Put your hands up, Rob.
Thanks, Ian, for this. That was really helpful. We know that we've got substantial gaps in the health and care system in terms of staffing for registered and non-registered staff. So we've been talking for some time about how do we make sure that we see the health and care sector as a banker, if you like. You know, we know we're going to need the NHS and its investment in it. We know we're going to need care and investment in it, and we can have good jobs in both health and care. But we need to work at it, and we need to work at some communities understanding while feeling that they've got a place in it. Because both sectors, they're not, huge, aren't they? They're not just about doctors, nurses, therapists, care support workers and healthcare assistants. They're about, finance and catering and communications and IT and all sorts of other things. So it'd be really good to make sure that the framework fits with our idea that health and care is part of the future, and that there are a whole host of careers for people. And we want to try and match the fact that we can't get people for some of our organisations to the fact that some people can't get jobs. And we're working with Peter and Yorkshire universities and the colleges on what that might mean between us. But it'd be good to test the framework against our aspirations.
Thanks, Rob. Ian, you want to come back?
Yeah, the answer is I think that's really useful, and I think probably one of the things we need to develop, part of what's in the framework, is a look at sectors and what is needed in those sectors. I think so. We've captured, what we think is important for the health sector, but I don't think what we have captured yet is that how some of the sectors actually work together. So some of the things you're probably looking for in the health sector are actually sectoral skills elsewhere as well. They're not specific health sector skills.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else? Councillor Cooper, Deborah?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Ian, for a really good report, even though we know that it's going to be worked on even more over the coming months, I have to say. And I just wonder whether we can include some of the emerging sectors coming out of COVID, so the roadmap recovery of COVID, thinking about in particular the emerging green sector in terms of energy and retrofitting houses and all of those different type of skill sets that are going to be required, and new skills that people haven't even got yet. But we know that those opportunities are just around the corner. Similar to the way that we looked at transport and what skills were needed for the future transport, that we were hoping that we would be able to deliver a new infrastructure and transport for the region. I think also it's clear on lots of other emerging sectors after COVID, and of course as we move forward in terms of climate change and so on. So I know we're tight for time. I just wonder whether, please, could you just scan the horizon on what the skill sets may be required for some of those areas, and think about how we might ensure then that we've got the right people equipped with the right skills so that they can take opportunity of those jobs once they arrive. Otherwise, what we'll end up with is, getting people to come to the region to fulfil those roles, and that's not necessarily what we want to do with all of those roles. What we want to do is equip our residents with those skills so that they can take up those job opportunities when they come along.
Ian, in the report it says working towards net zero. I'm assuming it should read working towards net zero carbon. I think,
yes, it's just.
Is there a bit that's missed off?
We're just abbreviating.
So I think so I'm assuming that look, based on what Councillor Cooper said, all very important stuff, but there'll be a drop down in terms of that will capture all that.
Yeah, and I think the importance of what Councillor Cooper's saying is that yes, some of those things that Councillor Cooper mentioned are recognised and captured, the kind of some of the green skills, but we're also very conscious that there's a number of things that we don't know exactly what the skills are going to be needed, and that's part of the idea that we can continually be re-looking at that and adding as opportunities. I think
one of the things that, and this is already in view of the left-hand combined authority, but colleagues might not be aware, but the digital exclusion bit is really, really important. And that was discussed at the last LEP board meeting. And in terms of the baseline, in terms of where we are at, from memory, I think 16% of people within our region are still digitally excluded. So it's people that we were talking about, the people who are on the fringes of society, the people who are living in areas where there is great poverty. And that is something that really needs to be looked at. And a lot of that 16% is actually young kids, young children. Because people like us on this call, it's a given that, you know, everybody's got a mobile phone, a tablet, and all the rest of it to actually work from home. I know schools are back today, but you know, it just makes me wonder that how many young citizens who are the future of tomorrow will have been adversely impacted in having a good future. You know, it's just unbelievable to even think about it. You know, I've got a daughter who's 17 doing A-levels. You know, she's been working hard, but I'm worried about her. But what about the other thousands of children that are our children, you know, West Yorkshire children, will actually be adversely affected. So again, there's a lot of work to do around that. Just put your hands up. Somebody, I saw a few hands go up, but Mike, yeah, Mike.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be quick. Thank you, Ian, for sharing this. This is really great. I think it's a really good update of the framework. I think the vision and the objectives are really strong in there. One thing that I did wonder was, given where government policy is going on this, with National Skills Fund and various other bits and pieces, which isn't necessarily going to be delivering the devolution we might all think is needed to do this well, whether there just needs to be something in there which is going to focus on partnerships, because that seems to be something that's coming through quite strongly, and the importance of good local partnerships with providers, but maybe even central government. Just some nod to the fact that that's going to be a key role for the combined authority.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, I can't see anybody else putting the hands up, and we might finish in time. Well, before time. Got a whole 2 minutes left. Wow, that's really good going. But anyway, look, if there's anything that anybody thinks, oh God, I should have said this, please contact James or any of the officers. And I'm sure we'll take that into consideration. We don't have a date. Well, we might have a date, but it's not on my notes. But we will be having another panel meeting. Is it this year or is it after May, James? Is there a next one? Is there one that's planned? This part of this side of the elections?
No, I think it's in June, so it'll be after the elections.
In June, right? Yeah. So in June, it'll be a complete new landscape because we will have a West Yorkshire Mayor. In terms of this panel, there will be a place and a role for this panel. It might be in different form. I don't know what that form will be, but whatever form it will be a stronger form. Because I think one thing that we have done in the last couple of years since I've been chairing this meeting is progress was not as fast as I wanted it to be, but in some ways, actually, in a funny way, that was a good thing, because you know there's no point in rushing into things until you actually have a clear idea and a clear plan. And we've all got different views, but to get that focus in terms of these are the issues we need to focus on, the means and the program that we want to do on the project might be different, but we know what the key priorities are. Not just from this panel's point of view. I think this panel was always very, very committed in terms of what they wanted to do, but also from the wider LEP and the combined authority point of view. But it's only very recently, and the pandemic actually sharpened it even more, that these are big issues that we need to tackle, and the issues can only be tackled right if we have the bigger conversation. So I'm really pleased that the big panel, which is the business investment and growth panel, everything what they talk about resonates what we're talking about. The investment panel, the same thing, and everything else that takes part. When the LEP's talking about the inclusive growth agenda, Roger is very, very clear. He gets the agenda. He's now sort of like, you know, really energized and really motivated into making it happen. But one thing that I can assure you that this is something that the LEP is taking very seriously. The combined authority is taking very, very seriously. And I'd like to thank you all for your hard work. Well, I'll see you on the other side of the elections, you know, whatever form that might be. I don't know. Anyway, thank you very much. And I think that's it. Is there anything I've forgotten, James? There's a few chats that are coming up, but I think the chats is just.
I think we'll capture all that, Chair.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So thank you very much, and good night, and God bless. And I'll speak to you guys soon. Bye bye.
Thank you, Chair. Excellent meeting. Thank you.